We'll go ahead and get this recording. So we've got it saved and move on. So guys, welcome to LeapChat. This is the second edition of LeapChat. We've done one of these so far. It was a great success, ton of interaction, ton of chat, ton of questions. So hoping we get the same. Mike and I, one of the things we're doing with LeapGen and our whole organization is we want to make sure that we do this on a bi-weekly basis to try to educate the community, get topics out there, and get some collaboration going. So we're not going to always do it on Fridays because once we scheduled this one, I got a ton of grief from people from Australia as well as Europe telling me that I wasn't global, and it's late in Europe and it's Saturday in Australia, so Fridays aren't going to work probably, but we'll make sure that we do this every couple of weeks, and love your feedback on how to continue to make it better. So a topic that's come up with almost all of our clients, everyone we talk to, both from an enterprise standpoint and a vendor standpoint, is this whole concept of design thinking and who are we designing software, who are we designing processes for, and who are we designing, our deployments for today. So Mike and I thought it would be a great topic to drill into this. We do work in this as we do process design for organizations, but I thought it would be good to try to get it out there and have a good meaty discussion on it. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you, and then I'll jump in.
Sure, thanks, Jason. So I think a good place to start is by answering the question of what is design thinking, and I like to think about it when working with clients as the place where real life and dreams collide. You're taking the opportunity to step back and think through what processes could be, what they should be, based on the consumers ultimately that you're looking to serve. However, you are checking reality-wise in terms of what data you're looking to get out of the process, what different stakeholder groups need out of the process. So as you're going through design thinking when reimagining your processes, maybe preparing to deploy new functionality or a new technology entirely, I like to use design thinking as a means of both blue skying and reality checking as it relates to rolling out solutions that are ultimately going to be centered around the worker, but at the same time does get the organization the information it needs. So when you're looking at different types of workers, different types of human capital, talent management related processes, really design thinking is a way to really apply a discipline, looking at different workers, different stakeholder groups as consumers, and ensuring that you're applying design principles that will cater to them. In other words, no unnecessary steps, no unnecessary screen real estate taken up with things that frankly don't matter. So as it relates to design thinking, really, I like to think about it in terms of consumerization of the workers that you're trying to serve.
So Mike, if we think about the world of HR and workforce technology today, what do you, tell me what you think about the concept for, the concept of design thinking and how much it's being used. Do you think that it's being used in most deployments today? And I would love people that are on the phone, that are in the practitioner space to talk also. Like, are you guys using design thinking? Are you thinking about personas and realize, and we'll talk about what a persona is that, that we're designing for the worker more than we're designing for the HR department?
Yeah, for me personally, I think this is a different mindset than most folks in HR approach process design. Typically, you can fall into a trap when you're working on a project. I mean, after all, we're all workers. We all roll out of bed in the morning and we go to work for a reason, to get paid, to do what we love, and so forth. But when you have HR processes being designed by HR professionals, you've definitely got a skewed view of the world, and your subject matter expertise can often take over what's truly needed, what will truly be adopted by the organization. And I think that's true in any business discipline. If you've got marketers designing marketing related processes, finance people, so on and so forth, you fall into the trap of, designing at a 501 level when you really should be at a 101 level in order to drive adoption. It's when you fall into that trap that you get a bunch of unnecessary steps being added, a bunch of unnecessary data being requested that may ultimately never get used or entered into the system in the first place.
So Mike, I you need to be a little more blunt. I mean, we suck at this, right? I mean, this is new, right? I mean,
maybe you do.
People that we've had to, I know you're trying to be nice, but I mean, the only reason that this is a new concept, like the only people we've really focused on rolling out HR technology and workforce technology for up until now is 98% the HR department. And maybe we thought a little about self-service and saying, well, hey, what could it do for people? So, I mean, I know that you used a lot of words, but I would just like to say we suck at it. Now, I don't have to say that, but I say that.
That's a broad brush to paint with, for the most part. And I noticed Gail was nice enough to spread the love to HR technology providers as well. Not always designing with the worker as a consumer in mind. Yeah, and I'd say is an industry overall that's true. I have worked with some clients who are better than others. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah,
I mean, I think what's really important is that every single day we're implementing new solutions. And that's like a radical leap to begin with. To say, well, we're not in the middle of an implementation right now. Like, that's bull. Every single day we're in the middle of an implementation and a deployment, and every single day we should be pushing ourselves to think about what are we doing to make sure that we're putting tools in the hands of the workers with processes that make sense to them, or even if they don't make sense to them, we're explaining what the value is to them long-term, what the value is to the business, so that we in HR get some benefit from it. I mean, every single day. And if one day goes by, unless we're just developing reports for the HR department, possibly, or just tools for the HR department, which, I would question whether or not that's even a value. It's really important to think about this design thinking. A question that came out from a blunt, what vendor besides Infor is using design thinking? I personally think every vendor, well, I shouldn't say every vendor, but almost every vendor that I work with today, or that we work with from a client standpoint, that is inside any enterprise today, is using design thinking. They're thinking about the personas of the workers. Would you agree, Mike?
Yeah, but I think they fall short a lot of times because they're not the subject matter experts necessarily on what a worker at your organization looks like, say at a healthcare organization versus an organization that uses a lot of field engineers to get work done versus call center operations and so forth. So that's where I do think there is a bit of a disconnect, if you will, between clients and the vendors themselves. I mean, ultimately, the vendors need to make decisions on what's going to be baked in the product versus what's not. They try to be as flexible, or they're trying more and more, I'd say, to be flexible as it relates to things like workflows in order to accommodate. But I think that's one of the reasons why you see the rise in the app economy and open platforms, because ultimately the vendor's not going to be able to give you everything you need out of the box. Those vendors that have open platforms and will allow specialized applications to get developed to, accommodate processes. Like you think about an organization that's responding to disaster relief. They may need to do a lot of tailgate recruiting. I like to think of it as, they show up at a location, they need to find people that have, certain licenses, certain certifications. They may go through the entire recruiting process from, sourcing to hire right on the spot. And that's not something that, just one example of a process that may not be accommodated out of the box by a particular ATS provider, as an example. So I think that's why, from a cloud computing perspective, we're starting to see us kind of come back around to the idea of, well, maybe there should be some customization. Customization is not such a a dirty word after all. It's not to say you should make things overly complex, which often gets intertwined with that word customization. But as it relates to a software provider in Silicon Valley or any other tech hub being able to accommodate the needs of an agriculture firm in the Midwest or in Queensland, Australia, I mean, there's not that ability. These software vendors only have so much time, so many hours.
And Mike, I think it's personalization. I don't think it's customization. I truly think it's personalization. I mean, the minute we start talking customization, we have all the IT geeks in the world coming out of the closet, with their development tools saying, hey, we need to develop something. I think that if we do this right, we can use design thinking to personalize the experience for the type of worker. And maybe we need to develop a mobile app, which is, I mean, that's a development, but I wouldn't say we're customizing the software. I don't think we should get back into that word entering our vernacular personally.
Building tomatoes, custom app, customization. I hear what you're saying.
Don't change the code of the package solution so we end up with the shit show that we have, excuse my language, that we have today with a lot of people with customization.
Yeah, absolutely. Custom apps on the platform.
Yeah, no, agree. And you guys, once again, the concept of these LeapChat, sometimes I get a little too passionate, so I apologize if I swore. I'll try to make sure I don't do that. I want to take a couple of the comments. So Irv made a great comment. You need to design a feedback and improvement cycle for your implementation. So, I'm going to use the word deployment instead of implementation, Irv. And I'm also going to say that the feedback and improvement needs to be constant. It needs to be continuous. So I need to have a way, just like I measure people's mood on a mood ring. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. But a mood ring, I need to have the same thing for my deployments. I need to be understanding how people feel about a process. I need to understand where a process breaks down. One of the things we're doing at LeapGen in our change management and adoption area is looking at where a process breaks down and trying to figure out why it's breaking down. Is it breaking down because people don't want to do it? Is it breaking down because people don't believe in it? Or is it breaking down because the technology is just not good? So I completely agree with you, Irv, in that comment. The concept of a customer sat poll, that's stupid. You might as well not do it. Once a year, send out something. How are you feeling about our tools? That's the smile sheet concept. Let's get a participation trophy model. That's not going to do it. That continuous feedback is really important, which is why personally, one of the things around design thinking that's so important is the concept of service delivery and how do we make sure we're delivering the right services to people and gathering the feedback when it comes in.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on that point real quick, Jason, because you're the change management area, but you did so in this context of design thinking, and that's something that I think can often get lost as it relates to projects. And you've got the change management work stream. Those are the folks that are in charge of coming up with the right messaging, coming up with the right training if necessary. Change management, change enablement, change execution, give it a name to us, is really incorporated into the design work itself. So if you've got folks that are ultimately going to be responsible for determining, by persona, by stakeholder group, what the benefits are, what the points of resistance might be, they need to be involved in the design itself. Maybe not leading the workshops, but they need to be familiar with the personas. And maybe it is, some of the same people leading the design work that are also taking a lead role on the change work. To think about them separately is a recipe for failure.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great comment that came in from Catherine, which is configure versus customize. You can always configure, so adding a front end is needed. It's about end user experience. And, that's why, we're doing a ton of work with vendors like ServiceNow and some of the other, service that can do portal and content type work. There's another comment I love that came in from Bill, which basically said everything is or should be B to I. B to I being business to individual. I love that comment. So, just like we're talking business to consumer and people are like, well, consumers, we don't have consumers, business to worker or business to individual. I think it's a great, great comment that Bill, I mean, if nothing else comes out of it, I love that. If nothing else comes out of this, think about that. How do we develop and design in a B to I model? It's a cool acronym, not to overuse the acronym. And someone else said love B to I also. So Bill, thank you. We've all gained some, we've all leapt ahead based on this, based on this so far. Mike, do you want to jump onto another slide? I know you've done some thinking about this topic more than just taking all the questions coming in.
Yeah. So as far as why this is even important in the first place, it's about the worker experience, ultimately the I, if you will, or the I's. The I's have it in this case, right? In this shift in thinking toward the worker, why do it in the first place? And there's a ton of research. Harvard Business Review has probably done the most on it as to how valuable a good worker experience, a positive worker experience, everything from the offices that you're in to the flexible work agreements, perks, compensation, digital experience is to ultimately providing value to the customer, and that could be through productivity measures, CSAT measures, ultimately top and bottom line. So in terms of really this mind shift from rolling out HR processes for HR professionals, it's ultimately about in the case of recruiting, you're wanting to get folks in the door that can ultimately serve the gentleman that you see here on the lower right, but it's the woman on the left and all of her colleagues who may not have the same working style that she does, or work in the same environment as she does, or even have the learning preferences that she does. It's up to us as HR professionals, consultants, technology vendors to ensure that she's as productive as possible, that she's as prepared as possible in terms of skills, in terms of performance support, in terms of just feeling good about what she's doing. And I'm actually curious, Jason, we're talking a lot about design thinking. I'm kind of curious about what processes, in 2017.
Doesn't happen to, I hope that doesn't happen to the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Oh, Mike, are you back?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, you froze up there.
Oh, sorry.
All good. So you guys, one of the things I think that's really one of the things that Irv said earlier was, as we think about building the business case, when we go forward and we say to a CEO, hey, we're going to have happier workers if we do this, and our happier workers equal happier customers. I think that's really Mike, are you there?
I am. Can you see me? Now I'm not seeing my own video. I think I may have a platform issue here.
Mike, go ahead.
All right. Sorry. So one of the things I was curious about, is what processes all of you are reimagining in 2017. So this whole model of design thinking that we're talking about, and improving the worker experience in terms of engagement, in terms of development, in terms of ultimately productivity. What are you all working on in 2017? Oh, you've got a poll on that. Interesting. What a coincidence. So Jason, were you going heads down creating this poll? Is that why you cut out there?
Hey.
All right, let's see what results come in. That's great, Jill. We definitely should have done a multi-select on the question. Well, I'm not seeing Jason right now, folks, so I'm not sure if we'll be able to get the results. So we can go ahead and move along here in the discussion until Jason comes back. And one of the things that we wanted to cover was just this idea, and we've already started to do this to some extent, and that is, when do you apply design thinking? And, I think that design thinking can be applied anytime. I mean, it's not just when you're in the throes of an implementation. One of the things I wrote about in a blog earlier this week was the use of personas, and I'll be following that up with the use of journey maps when it comes to designing processes that ultimately drive a better worker experience. The things that we're doing today in reimagining processes should be revisited periodically. So design thinking can be applied when you're doing research, into maybe how other organizations with similar workforces are, rethinking their own processes, what they're doing to better engage workers, to better bring them on board, ultimately to better serve them as HR departments. Then, from the standpoint of an implementation, you may choose to have a more dedicated effort to design thinking and reimagining your processes. But after you roll out and you're measuring adoption, you're doing so in a few different ways, or at least you should be. You should be doing objective measures around adoption of a particular process, transactional measures, and the like. But you should also be doing that along with subjective measurements, interviews, focus groups, and the like from time to time to determine if your design thinking needs to be design rethinking. So here's, generation 2.0 of a particular process, say around real-time feedback to complement our current performance management practices. What do we need to be thinking about come 3.0, several months from now, or 12 months from now, or 24 months from now? This is true of all the processes that we're rolling out and improving. This should be about continual improvement, and design thinking is one tool that you've got in the toolbox throughout the entire life cycle of your business.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is really interesting that in this whole area, and it's going to come as funny because I just did my network here is for some reasons having such a bad day, but is the concept of fail fast. And I think that if you guys think about fail fast is a design concept, and it's a key concept that's part of design thinking. And what that means is that we learn very quickly through iteration, we learn very quickly through design, and then we make changes. So we don't wait 18 months until everyone goes away. If you think about the most successful consumerization, let's go back to B to I, it's the people that make changes really quickly. So we know something doesn't work, let's fix it. We know something doesn't work, let's fix it. And the only way to do that, back to Herb's comment, is have that ongoing feedback and that ongoing discussion with your users. So a big part of design thinking is building your processes that way.
Yeah, and there was a question that came in from, no, it was actually more of a comment just in the Q&A panel saying that personally think design thinking is not being used well as the workforce morphs a bit away from employees to those of contingents. We need to be gearing processes and systems that are as easy to use as apps on the phone. And coincidentally, right before this discussion, I was on a call with a former colleague, someone who I respect a great deal, who's working on job architecture and related processes for this very reason. So looking at job architecture in an era where lateral mobility has never been greater and where the use of contingent workers has never been greater. So looking at job architecture, not just from the standpoint of how are they managed, but then how are they fed to other processes like assessments, like job postings, whether they're for internal projects or potentially, longer full-time positions. So timely comment here, and I think that's a really insightful comment, that when we're looking at the worker experience, it's not just employees.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, I love Dave's comment. Mike, I don't know if you see that just came in about Agile versus waterfall. You know, with what we talked about, Dave, with fail fast, Dave's question, I'm sorry, I should repeat it. Are you seeing design thinking being applied more successfully using Agile PM methodologies versus traditional waterfall? And I say, oh my gosh, yes. You know, if we're looking at traditional waterfall methodologies, which are, hey, let's gather our requirements, let's push them up to a bunch of people to configure, let's get them back, let's do a quick test, and then we realize we're almost out of time before we need to get this thing launched. We don't have any time to refine, to prototype, to learn, to fail fast, to do that again. So the concept of Agile and an Agile project management methodology, which is we're doing these sprints, we're doing 2 or 3 week sprints, and we're making changes along the way. That's what allows us to do design thinking. If we implement solutions today, whether they be processes or technologies that tie back to the concept, the way HR has done things forever, which are in modules or chunks, which, hey, this year we're going to accomplish this. We're going to spend 9 months doing it. We're going to push it out, and then we'll see what happens. That's the stuff that kills us. I mean, we look stupid. Chances of success on the first time are slim. So we have to be using Agile. And it's a great comment, David. And I think it's, you know, Mike, something we could have a whole conversation about Agile and the value of that based on the way the world works today.
Yeah, a good question just came in too. Also more readily and practically answered in an Agile environment than a waterfall one. And it's in prototyping, I found HR often pilots ideas with HR first, but that's not necessarily a good sample before rolling out to the entire company. So you may not fail fast in that proof of concept, but you'll fail fast as soon as you roll it out more broadly outside HR. So the question is, do you have any tips on how to select a good pilot group for prototyping? And I do have a couple of, actually. One is to, particularly for those of you that may be looking at digital workforce transformation as, you know, a mission critical initiative that is going to last the next, you know, X number of years. And we've all heard the term customer advisory board. You know, there can be, you know, something called a workforce advisory board. I've seen them branded differently. We've brought the idea to clients, and some have chosen to call them business involvement networks, the workforce advisory board. Some even, you know, just say voice of the customer, except we're talking about the workforce. But in looking at selection for those advisory boards or pilot groups, you know, look for people that want to play with stuff, that are passionate about certain processes. And in any process that you're examining, ideally you're doing so, you know, demographically, meaning, you know, location-wise, personality-wise, generationally, looking at as broad a spectrum of folks as you can. And when you're doing that and doing the design thinking in the context even of that proof of concept, those are your personas. I mean, these are the folks that you should also be working with to say, this is what good looks like. This is what a good manager looks like as it relates to developing a team. This is what a good team leader looks like as it relates to driving global collaboration across a project-based company. I mean, those are the types of initiatives that should be underway before ultimately rolling out to the broader organization.
Yeah, Mike, I love one of the comments that came in just now from Irv about the best chance to solve a problem. The core problem to be solved needs to be identified, and I just want to give Irv a hug because, well, maybe not, but I mean, but to me, like, in the world of HR and workforce technology, what we've been doing, and I come from this space, and so does Mike, we've been serving up whatever the vendors feed us. Truly, I mean, when the vendors roll out new capability, what do? We sit at the table and say, okay, this is what we're eating tonight. Okay, new functionality comes out, this is what we're eating tonight. And oftentimes we do that without thinking about the business problem that we're trying to solve. So don't put in new functionality just because the vendor pushes it out. The vendors are trying to meet your needs. Put in new capabilities that are tied to the business need. And by the way, and this is another whole discussion, but we won't go right now. The only way to know what the business needs is to get out of HR. So we have to be outside of the business deep. I had dinner on Wednesday night with a CHRO from a big bank in Russia. And I said, why are you so successful in this? And she said, because I don't listen to HR people. You know, every one of my people I tell, if you're not in the business, we have no right to be doing our job. HR should be invisible as far as doing things for themselves. They should be out within the business. So I loved, you know, that comment. And Irv, your comment about, it gives you a better chance to build a solution. You know, one of the things that we do when we're designing vision maps for people is we say, what are the outcomes? So if you can say, what is the outcome we're trying to achieve with this process or technology, then all of a sudden I have a chance. If the outcome is just get them to log in, or the outcome is go live, or the outcome is, you know, whatever, that's not going to help you at all from a design thinking standpoint, or how do you actually get people to use this stuff?
Couldn't agree more, Jason. And Ryan just submitted a good comment building on that B to I concept in terms of using personas ultimately to drive the individual choice that we're flashing on the screen right now. And he uses the example of a menu. You know, the analogy, a menu needs to be set based on the patrons, what they like to eat, what food allergies they have. And personas are a great way, not only for the software vendors to design their software and develop the use cases that they're looking to solve, but ultimately customers. What are you trying to get done as consumers of the software? I mean, that's really what it boils down to, and why personas are such a fundamental component of design thinking.
Yeah, Irv made another great comment that this concept of individual choice, Mike, you put the slide up on the screen, I think is good. I mean, Irv, I do see vendors doing more work in thinking about personas and things like that. But, you know, one of the reasons that Mike and I founded LeapGen and building our teams from a consulting standpoint is we in HR are not ready for it. You know, we're not sorry, I didn't mean to stutter there. We're not ready for it. So, where I came from before founding LeapGen was TMBC, the Marcus Buckingham company. We built some great tools that was just acquired by ADP. But every time we walked into an HR department, they weren't ready for that. So, you know, Irv, I think that we will see better tools, true. But, you know, one of the things that like our Leap Academy, our education sessions, the in-person education we're doing, is teaching people how to consume that capability and how to roll that out, because that's different than deploying HR technology for the HR department. It's a completely different mindset when I start to think about how do I deploy that capability around personas out to the workforce.
Yeah, I do want to just jump in with a bit of a contrarian point of view relative to some of the statements that have been made in like the last 10 minutes, Jason, and that is, what are we not necessarily good at sometimes as HR practitioners is taking advantage of the software that we do have. So I would bet my house that when it comes to doing a health check, for those of you who've ever been involved in one, you're often not utilizing the technology to its fullest value. I wouldn't say to its fullest extent or all of its capabilities, because only a fraction of the capabilities should apply to any organization for any, core HR platform, any, big suite and the like. But how many organizations have you walked into, Jason, where, they've gone live and, that's it. The person who's responsible not for, taking the help desk calls, but who's responsible for enhancing the processes, enhancing the software on an ongoing basis to keep up with what the business is doing. I would say one of the things that frustrates me about this Agile world is that when we think of Agile, we often think about it in the context of an Agile project. Agile doesn't stop down live.
Yeah, and this Angie asked a question, or she made a statement. She says, "I love Agile, but from an HR systems standpoint, it seems like most of the software vendors' implementation processes are still waterfall." And I think what's really important to understand is that might be the case, Angie, but what you need to do is you need to take the vendor's software and deploy it in an Agile way. Okay, so a lot of us can't wait. I always tell people we're way too focused on vendors. We count on the vendors to do way too much for us in the HR community. The vendors, these HR technology vendors, their job is to develop software. What we do with it, how we deploy it, all of that stuff, that's our job. Now, they might have recommendations, and if their recommendations don't match yours, we need to push back. But this is why I recommend to every organization that they have some sort of a program management capability that's not by the vendor, that's someone internally who can actually say, we're going to take whatever the vendor gives us and we're going to run it through our filter to make it Agile. Okay, because the vendor can't do that. The vendor can't do that itself, because they don't have your organization. You're the one that owns your organization.
Yeah, and I would say the comment that Ryan made in terms of the launch feeling like the finish line for Agile when it's really closer to the starting line, absolutely. But what I have found is that it's not always. It's often the HR buyer who has fallen short after go live. They may have someone even at the software vendor that is making themselves available on a periodic basis per the contract that they've agreed to. Post go live, you've got access to this, give it a name depending on the vendor. Client success manager is a common one. They're not always, the buyers ultimately aren't taking advantage of the expertise that they have. They're not looking at the release notes, and I understand business context needs to be added, but if you're not doing either of those things, you're simply not taking advantage of the investment that you've got. And not every HR organization is set up to do this on an ongoing basis, which is another reason we launched LeapGen, because we can help prepare organizations for that post go live world.
Yeah, like that bucket of services that we call Leap ROI, that's run, optimize, innovate. Run, optimize, innovate, and it just happens to stand for ROI. And this is where I firmly believe that the value comes, is once you're live, that's where you actually start to see value. You don't get value when you're live and you move all the people to another project. It's the sustainment. So I've lost my 25 pounds. Just because I've lost 25 pounds doesn't mean my cholesterol's down and it's going to stay down. I need to figure out what I'm going to do going forward to sustain that lifestyle. And that's a big thing that a lot of HR organizations don't have. Mike, I want to get back to this best practice thing because it's generating some good comments. One of the things that I think is really interesting about best practice, and some people on this call, as I look at the good list of people, know I have this feeling. If vendors deliver best practice, and all we do is take the best practice that we put in and implement that, we're all going to look exactly the same. Yeah. And I think one of the things that's really important is we don't want to look the same. You guys, we work in a world that's competitive. We work in a world where every single day we're fighting to be the employer of choice. We don't all want to look the same. So this concept of taking vendors' best practices and everyone's going to do things the same way, that doesn't give you a competitive advantage, A. And B, every business is unique. Every business has its own DNA, its own signature that's unique. So, Kurt just made a good comment. The best practices are those that come from the organizations and the local teams. It's not what comes from the vendor. So, please be careful with, hey, we deliver these best practices. You might use them as maybe starting points. But, every single vendor says, hey, out of the box, we deliver 30 or 60 or 40 or 90. They know HR best practices from an HR standpoint. They don't know your company, and that's not a rip on the vendors, but they can't. Mike, it looks like people want to talk about personas. Let's talk about personas because that's another key concept here.
Yeah, a fundamental one, absolutely. So personas are really, the question came in about how does one go about creating a persona, to paraphrase. And creating a persona is really an exercise in trying to thread the needle of painting everyone with the same broad brush, which we know we don't want to do, but in practice, designing for the individual. If you come from an organization that has, between employees, contractors, interns, part-timers, and so forth, 10, 15,000, 100,000 people, you're obviously not going to be able to interview every single one of those folks, right? So that the idea here is to thread the needle between building the right number of personas, and generally speaking, a persona is going to be broken down into a few different sections. So you're going to start with, role. And within a role, you may choose, based on both survey-based research that you do, practice in terms of just day-to-day interactions with these workers, as well as, focus groups, interviews, create composites of people within each one of the key roles that we're talking about. So this exercise, you can see the slide up here right now, is going to look much different inside, the healthcare organization in the upper left, and the field engineering organization in the lower right. But what you're really trying to do is base the personas on real research that you do, not that a vendor has said, well, we baked in best practice for your industry. How did you come about this best practice? Maybe we've got some proprietary processes, our secret sauce, that make our call center reps the best in the business at turning, inbound calls into outbound sales opportunities. So really looking at these personas, the role, what makes them tick, what are their goals, be aspirational. If you're trying to generically create a model where managers are better developers of people, focus on the folks that are better developers of people, and create a persona that is aspirational. You don't want to focus just on current state and automating what these folks do today, which may be broken in the first place. So from there, you're also looking at not only goals within a particular role, but goals inside the experience that you're trying to create. And the experience that you're trying to create may be something as specific as the application process for a job, or it may be something much broader than that. We want to create an environment, a consumer-like environment for self-service around all employee transactions, all contingent worker transactions, everything from onboarding, sunrise, to retirement, sunset, everything related to medical benefits, to confidentiality agreements and the like, to making sure that when I transfer jobs, I've got access to the right equipment. That's a much broader experience. And it's really up to you as it relates to these personas to determine, when we're being aspirational, creating, Jane the nurse, or Bobby the nurse, who happens to have a much different working style, maybe works in a different unit of the hospital. When you're creating these personas, you're doing so with the idea in mind of, I'm applying this particular exercise on this persona to the scope of the experience that I'm trying to create. And that's going to vary widely based on the process that you're taking into account. And if you're starting with one narrow process, leverage that persona for the next process. So the great thing about personas is that they're portable and they're updatable.
Yeah. And Mike, I just want to add that the other thing that's really important about personas, and this is so key, so I hope you guys like freeze that, Mike's definition of persona with what do you do with them. First of all, you need the persona feedback to develop the process for the person. Okay, you can't just think that you know what they do. Many of us think, well, these people are out in the field, they don't have access to a phone, or these people are out in the field and they'll never do this. We need the person involved in the process. Second of all, every bit of work that goes into developing your processes for personas, that's your change management right there. Like, you got it right there. The things that matter to people as you're developing the personas, That's what's going to help you make sure that when you push out messages to them, they see the value. So don't go through your whole process work and all your project management work and then say, okay, now we're going to bring in change management, because they just missed the whole conversation. They should be involved in the beginning to understand that all of this persona development you're doing is what actually creates the value in the change management process going forward. I love Aaron's comment here. An effective persona identifies core pains and fears. Wow, this one almost makes me cry. An effective persona identifies core pains and fears to spark empathy, understanding, and compassion, and engage the team in solving this persona's problem. It's so perfectly said.
Yeah.
It's so perfectly said. You know, that's what's getting us to the B to I model. If we don't understand the pains and fears, we're not understanding the empathy about what they're doing. We're never, you know, we might deliver B to I, but the B to I is going to equal B to, you know, invalid, because we're kind of going to be like, oh, we didn't meet their need.
Yeah, actually, change management has come up as well here. David saying that as a change management person, you're speaking my language. I've noticed on some projects, and I'm thinking about one very recently where these interviews with personas, I mentioned the idea of being aspirational and what you want someone in this role to be. You do need to take into account the folks that maybe have the old habits that you do want to break, and that will involve, you know, a cultural change, and these folks need to get on board or not. You know, some folks will say, you know, we've gotten too big as an organization. You know, I don't like, you know, these processes. You know, I don't like spending this much time to develop my employees. I need to focus on what I'm doing as an individual contributor. You know, these personas also need to be taken into account in terms of, okay, well, they're either in or they're out. And if they're in, what do we need to do to get them to this aspirational stage of what a good manager looks like in our organization going forward? So that's another reason from a change management standpoint, Jason, why those folks need to be involved and need to be informed about what's the delta here between current state and future state. For some, it's going to be a lot easier to make the leap than it is for others.
Yeah. Yeah, Roman, I love your statement there. The statement about, should it also make sense to create personas by workforce type, like millennials and baby boomers? And you guys, one of that, you know, I call that the technographic. Well, actually, I don't call that the technographic. I think it's important to take that, combine it with the technographic of your people, which is, you know, how many of them are using technology? How engaged are they in technology? Because you have baby boomers that want to use this technology more than others. Yeah. You have millennials that are scared to death of putting their stuff out there today. So I think that going, you know, and you know, that concept of, you know, Ryan has put up there, digital natives versus digital immigrants. You know, we all have to just be cognizant going forward of what's going on in the world in some of these areas, because we have millennials who are now starting to get afraid. We have other millennials who are not afraid at all. So I'm not sure that has to be one component, but it can't be the only component, because otherwise we're boxing things out. People do it too often, like, we could never roll this stuff out because our people are too old. They don't say it like that, but that's really what they mean. And that's not the right way to think about it at all.
So it looks, Jason, like you just launched another poll as we're coming to the top of the hour here, and we do want to get your thoughts on potentially informing a future LeapChat. So the question is, what is your most significant challenge to reimagining processes you want to reimagine this year? So we want to make these conversations practical for you, things that you can use, ideas, concepts, whether we're communicating them or folks in the audience, your fellow attendees are. What are your most significant challenges? I definitely see another, you know, at least 2 LeapChats coming out of this poll.
I mean, you know, what's really interesting about these old habits, you know, one of the biggest issues with old habits, you guys, is that when you implement processes and technologies, I so often find that the executives that are sponsoring these projects are not involved in some of the detail work. And I completely understand why, But at the same time, if you count on the people that are doing the work today to be the ones designing the work going forward, what are you going to get? You're usually going to get the same thing you already have today. You're going to get old habits. So, you know, Bill has always done things this way. So, of course, Bill's going to say, oh, that's how I've done it. David's always done things this way. So, David's always done it. You have to make sure, I mean, one of the things we're teaching at Leap Academy is you have to have change agents. You have to have change agents that when the vendors come in or when process people come in and they say, hey, don't map my existing process. Like that's what we've done for the last 4 generations here of HR, is we just keep taking our existing processes and putting them in new technology. Don't do it. Don't do that. Like, the world has changed. Like, there's no reason. Sorry, Mike. There's no reason to do that at all. You know, it's like saying we're going to reinvent the dial phone. You know, or like, you know, there's no reason to do that. So we have to have the people working on these projects be change focused and be willing to take that leap to try something different. Otherwise, we keep doing the same thing and we're wasting money. And then, as I say all the time, what do? We blame the vendor. Yeah, oh, that piece of technology didn't work. Oh, that systems integrator sucks. No, it's you. I mean, it's we that suck, because we're not putting the people that are working with those people on a day-to-day basis, we're not making sure they're the change agents. Sorry, Mike, I didn't mean to go off there.
Not at all. I love the energy, man. It's, you know, not something I haven't heard you spat off about before, that's for sure.
Yeah. There's a couple other, sorry, Catherine. There's a couple other things here that are really interesting to me that have come in from a question standpoint. So first of all, that old habit stuff that won the poll, I'll end the poll so you guys can see the results. That old habit stuff, that's a terrible challenge. I mean, I understand it, but if that's the most significant challenge, you know, that's actually an easier one to fix than some of the others. Like, don't have access to the tech. Look at that. That's the lowest. Like, which means stop spending money on the tech and start spending money on change and start spending money on how do you actually change these processes. Because, I mean, I think that's so fascinating to me. What do people do? They just go out and buy new tech. But look at this slide. It's showing us that it's not the tech. It's that we're trying to break out of this inertia. The reason we call this company Leap, Jen, is that we said, hey, we have to make a leap. We can't keep doing the same thing that we've been doing. Scott, while I'm bantering, I just saw your thing. Old habits should be respected in order to identify who to bring closer to the input table. Completely agree. You have to know A to B, and you have to understand what that is. And the delta is change management. No, thanks for coming. The delta is change management. So, you know, they need to be respected. I didn't say to like tell them to whatever, but at the same time, it doesn't mean we copy them and say that's the way it has to be. Tom had a great comment. Design thinking also suggests to spend a good amount of time identifying and observing the outliers and understanding why they are highly successful or struggle mightily, and learning from them to get extreme. I love the word extreme ideas. I mean, Mike, what would you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at both ends of the spectrum makes a ton of sense. And, you know, the idea around, you know, having the customer advisors, having the folks that are involved in the business, a lot of that starts with focusing on people that are passionate about, you know, the particular topic. Like, actually, the thing that frustrates me most, well, not most, old habits frustrates me the most, but the 2 responses above it, not enough money to figure out, not a priority for the business. I mean, that flies in the face of, you know, people are our most important asset. Like, I'd love to get with the senior executives of, you know, the companies that these responses came from and say, you know, what the hell are you doing? Like, what are you thinking? Like, we need to get the money. We need to, you know, make this a priority. A lot of it isn't even significant money. A lot of it is just making it a priority for the business. And for anyone who's worried about, you know, old, you know, established talent leaving, retiring, and not being able to attract, develop, retain, the newer talent, I'll call it, to get the job done in the future. I mean, these are the companies that are no longer going to be with us. It should be a priority. So from my standpoint, I went on a tangent, even though the question was about looking at the extremes. You need people who are passionate about the topic from the business to weigh in.
Yeah. I love Irv's comment. Maybe tech has a dollar amount that's defined. I think it's really interesting, easier to pitch management. I think that, and Irv, it's a great comment. I think there's so much frustration by management on wasted money in tech right now that I think that if you went and said, hey guys, this might not be a tech issue. This might be a process issue, or this might be a change issue. Don't call it change management. This might be a marketing issue as far as how we're pushing things out from a value standpoint. I think that management would all of a sudden be very, very interested in, wow, they're approaching this differently. We're not just going to go out and buy new tech. This is why I tell organizations, before you pick a vendor from an HR standpoint, you should think through this stuff. And no matter what I say, it seems like I still run into this, is that people sign a contract with a vendor, the implementers come in, and then all of a sudden they start saying, well, what are we going to change and how are we going to think different? Once the implementers are there, it's too late. That clock's ticking. You already have a go live date. You don't have this time. So if you're thinking about buying new HR technology or rolling out new processes, we call it that phase zero. Spend the time on phase zero. Because if you do phase zero, going forward, you're going to be able to make sure that this stuff happens. If you don't, you're going to get boxed into that, oh, we ran out of time again. Let's just go live, and then we'll fix it in phase later. And I always say phase later equals phase never, because we never get to it.
Yeah, I love Ryan's comment along the lines of B2I. We've got some marketers in the crowd here, Jason.
Yeah.
Unlearning and development, unlearning old habits. I like that idea of an unlearning and development person being on a transformation project. It's a great call.
Yeah, Irv, the way you make a business, you're coming on back to figuring out the best way to write a business case for HR initiatives is to make them business focused, not HR focused. And tech, while tech might make it easier, I think there's lots of ways to make it easier than buying new tech today. And it's a good point. Tom just commented, building on Irv's comment, a lot of the ROI in HR programs and tech doesn't produce the HR budget, so it doesn't help the CHRO as much as the CEO. Yeah. Mike, go ahead. You look like you want to jump on that one.
No. That's the whole point of the business case, right? Is value to the business. So the price of technology, that should only be a small component of any business case. If you're ultimately not talking about making workers more productive, making them more engaged, making it a better place to work, and the value that brings to the business, both the tangible and the intangible, then you're setting yourself up for failure. Even if you get the money approved, you're setting yourself up for an HR focused set of challenges and an HR focused solution, which we all know. We've all got enough scars to prove it, I'm sure. Setting yourself up for failure.
And lastly, Bill, I'm just going to end with this because I think it's a great comment. The shelf life of a process is rapidly shrinking. I think that's said so nicely. The culture of constant and disruptive change is way bigger than just the tech. So think about that. I was with a customer yesterday. I was like, you guys, it has to be agile. You have to build this in a way where it can change rapidly because that's how fast processes are changing. So I love the way this whole concept of this whole LeapChat today, we're on design thinking. Design thinking, agile, fail fast. The shelf life of processes are rapidly shrinking. So Mike, we spent an hour again and with great questions, and we thought we might spend 10, 15 minutes based on interaction. So looks like we hit another nerve.
Yeah, and thanks so much to everyone. This transcript is going to be great fuel for future Leap Chats. This is really, man, I'm not sure how I'm going to fall asleep tonight, but that's not everyone else.
Yeah, so thanks for joining. Hopefully you guys love this stuff. Please comment. I'm going to send out a real quick, I hate to do surveys after not talking about surveys, but we want to fail fast here. So what would you do different? Would you like more video? Would you like my network to work better? Would you like me not to swear? Would you like Mike to not be so contrarian? All those things. But we're going to do these every couple of weeks. So please join and spread the word around them. And let's make them bigger and bigger, because the more interaction, the better. And by the way, this isn't a webinar, guys. This is a chat. I hate webinars where we just present. I love the chat. So thanks, you guys. Have a great weekend, and keep the conversation going.
All right. Cheers, everyone.
Take care. Bye.